Ladies and gents, welcome back to episode 9 of the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe. And we are yet again prompted with some more shenanigans upon loading. What time is it? Does anyone really truly know? Of course they don't. Nobody knows anything. You and I don't even know each other. We're like strangers. Sure, I've adjusted all of the game's settings to your exact specifications, but who hasn't? Well, lots of people haven't. It's just what I do, like a day job. And now the job is over. There's no more information for me to gather. I've collected all the data on you that I can, and I still don't really know you. And you don't know me. And neither of us know what time it is. Actually, I do. I guess some settings are just unsettable. But if I'm being totally honest, the clock doesn't do anything in the game anyway. You won't have me here when the game starts next time, but that's okay. Video games were meant to be played alone. Really? You like being alone, don't you? I do. I really do. That's maybe the only information I really learned about you. Well, it's time for me to leave. There is still one more setting that we need to adjust, but it may take a little time before I'm ready for that. It's not really in my job description, but that's okay. Perhaps you'll see me again if you can find me. Talk soon. If I can find you. And we go again. I don't want to do the epilogue. I don't really want to do that. I want to try. There's a couple of routes that I haven't taken, so I'm going to try those and see what happens.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. The embrace of an old friend. A weathered companionship that stands the test of time. Stanley clutched the bucket tightly to his chest. This was not the correct way to the meeting room. If it
turns out to be a repetition of the last episode, I will just cut it short and skip forward to the epilogue.
And here it was. Had the bucket turned out to be correct? Was this better than the meeting room? Yes, Stanley thought to himself. Yes, perhaps it truly was. How insightful the bucket turned out to be. No, never mind.
So we're going to go back to the mind control room and we're going to switch the power off this time.
To go back and so
see if that happens any differently.
Through the maintenance section and walk
I'll fast forward this bit.
Opposite door. But here was the proof. The heart of the operation. Controls labeled with emotions, happy or sad or content. Walking, eating, working, all of it monitored and commanded from this very place. And as the cold reality of his past
we're going to switch this
Stanley
off this time.
decided that this machinery... Stanley and the bucket waited in blackness. Was it over? Yes, they had done it. Stanley and the bucket had defeated their greatest and darkest enemy, freed themselves from the tyrannical grip of the evil mind control machine. Freedom was now mere moments away. Excitedly, the two of them began to discuss the kind of life they wanted to live once they stepped through this massive door. The bucket wanted to learn to roller skate. Stanley wanted to sneeze in every country on Earth. Both of them wanted to begin watching a movie, any movie, but then stop it halfway through and begin watching it in reverse from the end. True, it was a simple life they envisioned, but it was one they'd lived together, with one another to lean on, to trust, to support, and to... What? Wait. What was happening? Why had the door stopped? Was Stanley and the bucket not about to be freed? An unbearable silence filled the room, lingering in uncertainty, until finally the truth hit Stanley square in the face. This building did not want the bucket to leave. Even the facility itself recognized the incredible calming presence of the bucket, needed the soothing warmth of the bucket, would go to any lengths not to part with the bucket. No, no, no. Stanley can't leave this place. Not while he has such a precious bucket in his arms. Not while this building has anything to say about it. Stanley realized he would never again leave this very room. But at least he has the bucket. To be trapped eternally in darkness isn't really so bad, Stanley thought to himself. As long as I have my bucket with me, right? I'll be okay, won't I? Stanley gulped. Very soon now, he was about to find out.
Okay, so that was a slightly different ending with the bucket. One more route to try,
All of his co-workers were gone.
which is to take the escape route, so I will skip to that
Stanley
point.
decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
Okay, so this time we take the detour to the escape route with the bucket.
Stanley and the bucket walked straight ahead through the large door that read, Mind Control. Although this passageway had the word escape written on it, the truth was that at the end of this hall, Stanley and the bucket would both meet a violent death.
Seems like the same ending again.
The door behind them was not shut. Stanley and the bucket still had every opportunity to turn around and get back on track. At this point, Stanley and the bucket were knowingly walking forward into a very painful death for each of them.
Very similar ending with the bucket.
As the machine whirred into motion and Stanley and the bucket inched closer to their demise, Stanley reflected on how meaningless the bucket's warmth and comfort had turned out to be. To be sure, it puts the mind and the soul at ease to embrace the bucket, but what use is a sense of ease when you're about to be crushed to death? This is what Stanley thought to himself, and he sort of kicked himself for wasting so much time carrying a bucket everywhere. Farewell, Stanley.
"Farewell, Stanley," cried the narrator, as Stanley and the bucket were led helplessly into the enormous metal jaws. In a single visceral instant, the bucket's life came to an end, as it was crushed violently to death. It was a shame, the death of such a magnificent bucket. It's true that all buckets are radiant in their own way, but this one stood above the rest. It was a glorious bucket to behold.
The bucket welcomes you to the grand exhibit. You are standing at the precipice of knowledge, much like a bucket itself. The human mind is frequently empty within. I know a few people like that. A cavernous void. But through use of the exhibit in front of you, the mind becomes full and enriched and substantiated. Knowledge of the bucket and its history is the only true knowledge we really have. Will you take what you learn here out with you into the world? Will you accept with an open mind what may be challenging about the information in this exhibit? Will you change the lives of yourself and your loved ones as a result of this exhibit, or will you turn a blind eye and continue to live as you were, in ignorance and darkness? Probably the latter, I'll be honest.
Can you see how arrogant it was for Stanley to take a bucket like this and to claim it for his own? Can you see the hubris that blinded him? Can you see that the bucket
Catatonic
is far
shock.
more noble than Stanley will ever be in his short life?
This bucket is depicted as having two handles. Such a design has never been created in real life, having been deemed too dangerous and recklessly experimental. Dozens are put to death just for attempting it. A replica of the Inferno bucket, which in the medieval era was so powerfully alluring it drove dozens of nations to war. Billions died, and yet in spite of it all, the simple fact remains: no one can control a bucket. The stress bucket. Presented without commentary. Okay. This is quite the museum to buckets. Buckets through the years. While we know that buckets predate the existence of mankind, we do not know by how long. This cave drawing depicts early man's discovery of the practical uses of the bucket, by which time the bucket had already likely been around for several millennia. Notice in these drawings how the bucket is allowing itself to be used, having judged humanity to be worthy of its treasures. Whoever made this game has really got a bit of a bucket fetish.
No man can own a bucket, and certainly not a bucket as dazzling to behold as this one. It is man who should kneel before the bucket.
This piece symbolises the necessary relationship between Bucket and humanity. However clear our grasp of the Bucket may be, there is yet more that is always out of reach. This distance inevitably is for our own good. Okay. Goodbye, cruel world. Oh. Oh.
But there is something we can do. Something we can do together, you and I, that will right this terrible wrong.
Kill the
Let
Bucket.
Stanley die. Let him be crushed by the machine.
What
Don't
about-
reset the game. Don't give him another opportunity to run off with another beautiful bucket.
What about
we can
my
save the
bucket?
world's buckets from their treatment as tools and implements if only we let Stanley die together. The bucket shall take its place as ruler, as leader, as commander of a new world.
The bucket's
going to
get crushed. Ow. The end is never... Right, I'm going to try one more route. Going through the door on the left.
Co-workers were gone. What could it mean?
I'll skip to that part.
Stanley decided to go to the meeting room.
It brings us out to the same
Still
location.
no one was here. Stanley needed the bucket's warmth and comfort now more than ever.
Okay.
Perhaps his boss's office was where he'd find answers.
So given that we've done all of the endings down this route now, I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to quit to the main menu. I'm going to play the epilogue. I think we probably got time in this episode to do this, I hope. Let's see. Many, many years later. I know you can read that. I just like to narrate myself. Oh gosh. Where's my bucket gone? Into the sun. Oh. Run to the moon. I like the music. Very tribal. Beautiful sky. Why do I feel like I'm taking part in the last episode of Blackadder Goes Forth? Oh, it's the memory room. Yeah, it has a generator. How odd. Cookie Nine's blog. Review the Stanley Parable 2. Like so many, I enjoyed my time with the original Stanley Parable, which underscores how truly disappointed I am with its sequel. Where the first game teamed with originality, the Stanley Parable 2 is dull, uninspired, and often insulting to its fanbase. Rather than expand on what made the first game enjoyable, the sequel veers off into territory nobody asked for, an infinitely deep hole. Who cares? Where are the new endings? What about the enjoyable bits from the Stanley Parable 1? Like the adventure line. Instead, we get an uninspired side quest collecting figurines. Even this diversion feels incomplete. Collecting all the figurines gives you nothing. I must say, though, I found the bucket to be quite comforting. What else have we got here? Yeah. Alright, let's carry on with the epilogue. Stanley Parable developers. No more spin-offs, no more sequels. Ooh, buttons. Jim. When the Stanley Parable launched to massive success in 2013, its creators made plans to build the property into an entire franchise, but a disastrous critical and commercial reception to the Stanley Parable 2 has prompted the developers to rethink their ambitions. As outlined in a press release they published today, it's clear that more Stanley Parable is just not what the fans want, reads the press release. We thought that we had a vision for the series that players would be excited about, yet it turns out this could not have been further from the truth. The press release goes on to promise to preserve the artistic integrity of the original game and to stop assaulting fans with our reckless and insulting creative visions. The word sorry appears more than 25 times in the press release. Jim buttons. Nothing but Jim buttons. Okay, that's weird. There's nowhere to go. Oh, here we go. And that'll be the infinite hole, I'm guessing. Goodbye, cruel world. Weird. And that's it. That's brilliant. Oh, here we go. I was going to say it's brilliant just to leave us hanging. They said we'd meet again. Hello again. It's nice to see you. But it's terrible to learn that there will never be another Stanley Parable game. Did you read what the developers said? Preserve the integrity of the franchise. What nonsense. The Stanley Parable is not sacred. We do not need to protect it. Screw the legacy. Let's keep making Stanley Parable games until the sun explodes. Let's run this franchise into the ground, just drag it through the mud and back. This sounds like it's a slight on other games developers, producers. And if people hate it, who cares? We're talking about Anthem now. You see, that was the narrator's problem. He was so obsessed with what people thought of his work. Don't make his mistake. Don't cling to the legacy. Let it burn. It's not hard. In fact, let me show you. Together we are going to make the Stanley Parable 3. It's simple. All we do is change the number of the game's title screen. We also really need a really dumb subtitle for the game, something loud and gaudy. Go ahead, try combining some random words together to make a new title for our game. Let's have a look. A new kind of electrode, avoid the lawsuit, champion. Here you go. Stanley Parable 3, avoid the champion, it's absurd, I love it. It's not what I put. Every time you restart the game, we'll advance the number of the sequel by 1, and then we'll pick a new subtitle. That way, the Stanley Parable will never end. And nothing in the game itself will change when you do this either. Adding more content sounds like work, no need to do that. It'll just be the same content, recycled again and again and again with the new title screen. What do you say? Should we go forward with this plan? I like it, but I want you to have a say as well. Don't do it. I understand, sometimes we're not ready to move on. That's fine. If you ever change your mind and want to start inventing new sequels, come talk to me. I'll be right here. And that's it. Let's just test and see. I think we have come to the end, and that was 27 minutes, although I might cut it to a bit shorter with all the outtakes. I think we've come to the end of the new content for Stanley Parable Deluxe, Ultra Deluxe. thank you very much if you've managed to stick with me and it for this long. And a huge thank you to Boffles. Boffles, I know that I have the original game to play through, but I'm going to do that offline myself, just to find the 19 endings I know there are. If I do find out that there are more endings for the Ultra Deluxe edition, I will of course make an episode 10. But for now, I've got some new games to look at. I want to say thank you for watching again. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That last bit's really important because I really need to see some growth on the channel. Otherwise, Mrs. Was is going to make me go and do something else. And thank you. I will see you all very, very soon. Bye.